All right, hey there, everybody. I see it's just three of us, so we're still going to get started anyways. Oh, sorry, 1 second. All right, so this is going to be a Photoshop basics kind of learning experience, I guess is what I'll call it. What I'll say off the start is that this is not going to teach you how to like create your own graphics. It's not going to teach you how to uh, do any heavy editing. This is just for somebody who doesn't know anything about Photoshop or just knows a little bit and just kind of wants to get their feet into it. Um, I think so. The first thing I'm actually going to go into is what Photoshop really is and how do you even get it, because some people don't even know how to get it. Um, so Photoshop in the past was a subscription based, or not subscription based. It was like a $600 program that you could pay for. It was about 300 to 600 depending on what you wanted to use it for. Here, let me get my mug out of the way. So, oh, sorry about this. Just going to do it. All right, there we go. So it was like a $300 program that you could pay for, in the big box stores and all that other stuff. They have since gone to a subscription base where you can pay anywhere from, like, I think for every Adobe program it's something like $300 a month, all the way down to like $5 a month, depending on if you're a student or not. And I'll get into that. But first, I just kind of want to show how you even get the program in the first place. So there's a couple different ways. If you come into here and you click on Photoshop, this is the Adobe website, adobe.com. And right now it's during Black Friday, so they're trying to push the Creative Cloud. And that's what this whole overarching thing is called, the Creative Cloud, versus, you pay a monthly subscription. You have a program that installs onto your program that's called Creative Cloud. And then with that, then you install all your other programs. And I'll show you what I mean here in a second. But here is Photoshop, and you can get it just by itself. If you click the buy it now and you step through all this, it ends up being about, here it is, about $21 a month just for Photoshop. And that's kind of expensive considering that there are alternatives to that. If I come back out here and I go back out and I go to creative and design, if I go to photographers over here, there's a bundle specific for photographers, and that's $10 a month, and that includes Lightroom and Photoshop. So for most people, that's the best option. There's no reason in paying $22 a month for just one program when you can get both Lightroom and Photoshop, even if you're never going to use Lightroom, for $10 a month. And that includes, I think it's 50 gigabytes of cloud storage. Um, and but I don't really use the cloud option for that. That's more for Lightroom, and Lightroom is for photography. Uh, but in this case, it's not going to really matter. So you download that, you install it. I guess I should also say at the start, I am using a Mac. However, it's going to be the same for PC and Mac. Everything that I'm telling you. So you'll just download and install it. Once you get that, the first thing that's going to pop up is the Creative Cloud. This is the Creative Cloud. Oh, and let me show you one other thing. If you are a college student, you're a teacher, something or other, there is this student discount, and there's some terms that you have to really know about. But if you're a student, uh, yeah, where, hmm, oh yeah, here it is. $16 a month, and that includes almost every program. But you actually have to be enrolled in a college that you have to go through ID Me and sign up through all that stuff. Same thing as you're a teacher, and some other things. And there is a free trial of this. You still have to sign up for the $20 a month uh, package, and this one will include everything. It's a 7-day free trial. I don't really suggest doing this because most people forget that it's a 7-day, and yeah. But if you do want things like Photoshop and Illustrator, um, which I won't cover Illustrator right now because that's a whole different beast, that's going to be in this package. It's not going to be part of the photography package. So, anyways, so when you download that and you open up Creative Cloud, it's going to show you all your apps, and it'll show on here that Photoshop is not installed, that Lightroom is not installed, and so you have to install that. Look, I've got an update available, and so you'll install that. Depending on your connection, it'll take like 5 or 10 minutes, and then plus the setup. All right, so let's dive straight into Photoshop. And when you first go into Photoshop, I'll let this load up. And this is the new version. This is Photoshop 2020. So I actually just updated right before the stream to 2020. So I don't know if there's anything different, but the basics are not going to matter. Anyway, so when you first pop this up, what you might actually see is this screen right here, the new document. I have mine turned off so that it doesn't pops up. But yours is going to look a lot different than mine too, because I have some presets and I've already designed some stuff. So this part, as far as Sawgrass printers go, this is probably the most important part. This is the part that I cannot harp on enough that people need to get right. Okay. So depending on I suggest that you print, or your workspace is the size of the paper that you're going to print to. So if you're going to use, say you have the Sawgrass 400/500, and you're going to print to 8.5 by 11. Well, create your document as 8.5 and 11. If you come over here to print, you'll see 8.5 by 11, and you come through all here and you can see everything. What I actually do is I'll come in here and I will manually input this in. So if you see under the preset details, and you can put in 8 by 11, okay? That will create, so whatever size. So if you have the 1000/800 and you want to do 13 by 19, if you got the bypass tray, or 11 by 17, or whatever you want to do, you're going to end up putting it in here. All right, and then so down here in the resolution, pixels per inch, you want to make sure that this is pixels per inch, and then or pixels per centimeter, but Sawgrass really does better math-wise with pixels per inch. Even if you are, in the UK or anywhere Europe other than the US, and you don't use anything other than inch, I would still keep it at pixels per inch, because again, it's just going to be a lot easier when you're searching and when you're dealing with Sawgrass themselves to use that metric. 300 is, I would say, the minimum you need to have that up to, which the 400 and the 800 can print up to 300 pixels per inch. The 500/1000 can print up to 1200 pixels per inch. And that's if you go through your settings, the advanced photo setting. Most people aren't going to use that. That's for, I don't even know who would need 1200 DPI, which is what that is. Okay. The absolute most important thing is this color mode right here. Most people want to put it to CYMK because it kind of makes sense. Your printer has cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. So it seems like it makes sense to put it in CYMK. But fight that urge to put it in there. You want it in RGB. And come down here to color profile, it'll be sRGB. This IEC And the reason being is that when you export to Sawgrass Print Manager, it performs best at RGB. If you don't know what a color profile or a color mode is, you can basically think of it as you go to a paint store and you pick up one of those color palettes and you bring it home to, compare to what you want on the house or what color you want. That's basically a color profile, is that it is a set of colors that when sent to whatever program, it tells it exactly what color it is, because the printer itself and the program itself doesn't see what you see. It only sees data, ones and zeros. So it has to be able to somehow translate that. That is the job of Print Manager. And Print Manager works best in sRGB. So when you're creating your image, make sure you're in this sRGB mode. All right. So I'm going to turn this back. Well, I'm going to I'll leave it at 8. Or I guess I should 8.5 by 11. And then if you're anywhere else, A4 paper, So we'll create that. And this orientation is not going to really matter so much. All right, so here I have, and this is our artboard right here. This is where everything happens. So I'm going to show you how to import an image. So there's a couple ways to do this. My favorite way is, let's just say I have this image on my desktop right here, the messy bun. The easiest thing to do is to take it from my desktop and drag it onto here. Once you drag it onto there, it's going to get into this what's called a non-destructive editing mode, meaning that it's not going to modify the original image. And this is where I can actually, warp it and change it. So I can change it exactly how I want to. What might happen when you first import this, and let me do it this way. Come on, there you go. Is this little link up here, which means that if you modify either one or the other, it's going to change proportionally. So if I change it, like this, it's all going to move together. Versus if I unclick it, it's going to change like this. If you're first starting out, I highly suggest that you keep it at this, change it back. I would keep this locked, because sometimes you get warping issues and then it looks funny, and then when you actually go to put it onto a t-shirt, it doesn't look right. So I would keep your aspect ratio or your editing ratio the same, so that you don't run into those issues. So usually, especially on the 500, and especially if you're doing t-shirts, you probably want to get this as big as you want, or 500/800 versus 9x13 on like an 800/1000. You probably want to actually measure out how big you want your image to be. And let me get back into that mode. If I have any questions about as to, so let's say I wanted to make sure that the width of it was at least 8 inches. If I hold, as I'm editing this, if I hold this down and I start moving it, you can see there's that little icon on the right next to where I'm dragging the width and the height. And so I can use that to modify it. There is another way to do this as well. So if I do that and I hit enter, or I click this little checkbox up there, then I'm done. Then I'm done moving it however I want to. If when you do that, you see pixels and not inches, that's probably actually, if you are just starting out in Photoshop, that's probably what you're going to see. you need to come into your preferences. And again, I'm on a Mac. On Windows, it's probably going to be, I think the preferences is under File or Edit, but you'll see preferences somewhere and you'll see Units and Ruler. That's what you want to see. Change your unit from pixels, probably it'll be pixels, to inches. That way, because when we're dealing with actual physical objects, we want to see what it actually is in inches, not pixels, because we don't really care about that. All right. So let's say that you import it and you didn't quite get the sizing right. On Windows, you're going to hit Control T. On Mac, you're going to hit Command T, and that's the transform tool. Same thing if I go to Edit and I go to Free Transform, and I can go back in and I can resize it. And then I can still see where my width and my height are. All right. Another way to edit this, because right now this is something called a smart object. It is, for all intents and how do I explain so it doesn't confuse anybody, that it's basically the image file, but not the actual image file. It's like a copy of the image file so that it's working in the background so that it doesn't modify the original file. Yeah. However, if we want to do any actual transformation to it where it's a little bit easier on us, we're going to have to rasterize it. And rasterizing it means that it's going to become part of the image and it's going to be a pixelated image. And I'll show you what I mean by that. If I come over here, here is the mom bun or messy bun layer that I created. Anytime you import anything or you pull in anything, it's going to create a new layer. And if I come over here and I click on rasterize layer, that is now part of this image. It is no longer linked to my original image, meaning that if I make any changes on this, it's done. I can't revert back in a sense, but I'm not actually doing anything to this image over here. But that allows me to actually, if I come in, when I do this, now under my properties, I now have the ability to transform it however I want to. So now I can just hit 8 inches and now it will be like that. Now, keep in mind when you are editing these images, you have to keep, it's different for the first and second generation printers, but I like to keep about a 0.2 inch border around the image because Sawgrass printers do not do edge-to-edge printing. So if I did this and I put this all the way over, this little part right here is going to get cut off on the printer no matter what I do. You cannot force the printer to print edge-to-edge. It just does not support it. So make sure that when you are, and that goes for the top, bottom, and both sides, all sides, you will not be able to print edge-to-edge. So I've got this pretty much at the top where, again, it's going to get cut off. So I kind of have to play with the height. Let's see if I change this to 7 point, or not 7 inches. It's a little too small, 7.5 inches. Now I've got that big berth. But if you actually measure out a 7-inch image, it's actually not that big on the shirt. So on the larger sizes, you might get some complaints and stuff like that, but that's for a totally different topic. All right, so I have my image here. Let's say I'm done with it. Let's say I've imported it. It's kind of like importing an image into, Silhouette Studio or Design Space for Cricut, whatever. I just want to print this out. The easiest way to do this is if you come into File, Export, For Windows print, for Windows people, you're just going to hit the print button. So Control P, Command P, File, Print, whichever one you want to use. You'll come in here, select your, don't actually select your printer, select the actual print manager, and then just hit the print. If you're on a Mac, like I am, you're going to export this to your Smart folder. All right. And then if all is well, Print Manager will pull up, and then depending on which printer you have, you'll end up editing all that other stuff. And again, if I didn't say it before, don't mirror your image in Photoshop because obviously Print Manager does it for you. One thing to check, especially on depending on what version of Windows, what version of Photoshop, come into the jobs and check your settings over here. Sometimes when I export, it'll be at 72 pixels per inch. Well, that's not letting, this new update must have actually stopped it. But you know, I'll get nothing but a warning. If you get a warning like this, one or more jobs does not fit within the current page layout settings, come into layout and preserve layout from designer. The reason being is that we have specified exactly how we want the printer to print our image. So I don't need, or we don't need, Print Manager to then center it, do all these things to it because we've already done the job for it. Okay. Same, you know, no matter what, that's what I would suggest you doing because sometimes Print Manager doesn't always get the layout quite right. And it can kind of get a little wonky sometimes. I've run into issues, especially doing tumblers, that it just completely shifts everything the way that I don't want it to, and I end up wasting paper. So that's what I suggest you do. And then with your color settings, something like this, vivid, if it's a photograph, photographic, okay? If you are on an 800/400, same thing. And then I was talking about the DPI earlier. Here's the print quality. So if you're on an 800/400, you'll only see high speed and high quality. If you have a 500 or a 1000, you're going to see this advanced photo depending on your substrate. I think polyester only has high quality. Yep. Metal has advanced photo, and there's another setting, and it goes up to 1200 DPI, which again, that is more resolution than most people need, and it's going to print extremely slow. So that is the absolute basic of what you need to be able to import an image into Photoshop and print it out to Print Manager. So you send it to your printer, everything should be good. Now, for the actual editing of these images, I'm not going to get into too much detail because there's a million YouTube tutorials out there on how to use certain things, how to do certain effects and things like that. I'm not going to really get into that, but I will do some basics. But first, I kind of want to talk about these different image formats. So I have right here my little mom bun or messy bun, and I have all these different formats. And most people get confused as to which format to use, which format to print from, which format to edit, all these other things. So the first thing is that I'm going to separate these from, so I got this SVG, I have this AI, and this EPS, and I'll put DXF in there as well. These are something called vector format graphics, meaning that in basic terms is that it's going to you can modify how big or how small it is and have no consequence of what's going to happen. Okay, because it's computational math driven. It's basically point A to point B over like a million different points. But the problem with that is that you can only usually use basic colors with them. They don't do very well with very complex colors, because if you had to do, a billion, math problems, even for a computer, it's going to slow down. It's going to have a huge problem doing that. So that's why you'll see some of these simpler graphics, especially when you get on Etsy, Design Space, or not Design Space, but all these other places. The more complicated looking, the more colors and everything, you'll just find them as usually as just PNGs. Like, so I've got this axolotl image. It's just a PNG because that would be extremely hard for a computer to render as a SVG. So if there's just way too many points in it. So most of these things like this, you're going to find as PNG. Something simple like this, where it's just black and pink, it's, more than likely you're going to be able to find it as an SVG. So either one of these will work in Photoshop, because once it hits into Photoshop, it's going to get converted into a pixel-based image. So it doesn't matter really which one you choose. However, I will say that some of these PNGs that you get are really small. For whatever reason, the designer didn't know quite what they were doing. They might have been good at art, but they didn't really size it correctly. So you'll end up with like a little 2x2 image, and you'll buy it and then you'll try to resize it and it looks terrible because it started out as this really small image. So be careful of what you're buying. Yes, Peggy, this will end up being recorded, so you can go back through at the beginning, but you didn't really miss much. But yeah, this will be recorded and it'll be on this YouTube channel. Okay, so most of the time I edit in a PNG because that's what most graphics come into. If you bring in your SVG, if you bring in your AI, whatever, it will work. So Rich, those EcoTank printers actually work pretty well as sublimation printers, but I have to warn you that most people, when they convert from a Sawgrass or from an Epson to a Sawgrass, that it's not going to act the same. So I want you to keep that in mind. What your press temps were, all these other things is not going to work. So most people, when they switch from an Epson to a Sawgrass, they end up getting very upset because they're like, I've got nothing but dull colors. I've got all kinds of other problems. It's because you have to learn kind of a whole new way of sublimating these items, because now you went from a water-based ink, which heats up a lot quicker, to a gel-based ink, which takes a lot longer to heat up, but is a lot less likely to clog because the gel is a lot less likely to dry up. And it's a lot easier to push through lines, blah, 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 blah. So just keep that in mind when you get your Sawgrass, that your first couple presses, just like probably when you first started out with your EcoTank, you're going to have different results. So, and then it's also very important to know that your EcoTank probably didn't have the correct color profiles. So what you ended up printing on an EcoTank and you end up printing on a Sawgrass might seem like two different colors. Well, that's because Print Manager you actually have something called a RIP, which is Print Manager, which actually handles all of your colors and makes sure that what's being sent to the printer is the actual color that it needs to be according to your image. So keep that in mind as well. Which are you talking about, like the time and temperature and pressure and all that? Uh, Unfortunately, I cannot recommend any one place because places are different. Even places like KeyPress Nation and Pro World, they recommend sometimes the wrong thing because it's for jet coal paper or it's for something else. The only thing I can suggest is that don't go pretty much go for what you were doing before, but expect it not to be what it was before. So if you were doing a t-shirt and you did 400 degrees for, let's see, some Epson guys go 45 seconds, then you probably want to go 60 seconds or even 70 seconds, depending on how many dark colors. Just like if I do black, I go 400 for 80 seconds on black colors or black heavy or dark heavy colors, because that ink takes much longer time to actually heat up. So I can't recommend one good place because for me it was a lot of trial and error, and that's the only thing I can suggest for you, considering that there's not really a good info. And then reach out to the community group uh, if you're having problems. All right, so back to this. So I'm going to import my image into here. I'm going to get it to whatever size I want to and hit enter. Now, one of the most common things that people want to change into here is, I want to change this from mom life to whatever, and I want to change this area to say whatever it is. Okay. So that requires us to edit this image. So as before, if we want to edit the image, we have to come into our layer and rasterize it. So now we can actually edit it directly. So let's say that I want to change this. And oh, I forgot to mention, I'm getting ahead of myself. When you first start off, this is probably your Photoshop's probably going to look a little bit different than mine. There's different workspaces that Adobe thinks that you need, and what you might start off with is this essentials. I don't like the essentials. It's pretty close to what you need, but there's certain things that I don't like about it. What I suggest you come into here is window. So this is going to be the same for Windows as well. You'll go to Window, Workspace, and I suggest painting. I don't suggest graphic and web because that's a lot more, that's more for actually designing graphics from the ground up versus painting. This will be more of what we're looking for. All right. So we have all our tools down right here. Most of the time that even for me, is I only end up using a small subset of these. Okay. So if I come down here and if I just hover over what it is, it will explain exactly what it does. Okay. And if you see, I don't, if you can see, there's this little like arrow down here at the bottom. If I click and hold on that, that means that there's more tools associated with that specific thing. And then if I click these three dots down over here and I hold down, there's even more. But the reason why those are there is because those are rarely used for, the paint stuff. All right. So one of the most basic tools that we need is the eraser. And so if I come over here and it looks like a little tiny, rubber eraser right there. It's the eraser tool. And I can erase this right there. It's as clean as that. If, however, come in here and I click on the erase, and then you see how it's got that symbol over it where it's, like the cancel, like I can't do anything if I click on it, and I get this error. This smart object must be rasterized before proceeding. That's because you didn't actually, rasterize it, but it will do it for you if you click OK. So either way, if you do it through here or if you try to actually edit it, it will force you to rasterize the layer, which then just means that so that I can directly edit it. So if I come in here and erase this, now I can change this to whatever I want, and then I can use my text tool. So over here, so my bar over here, there's this T right here, and there's two different ones. So if I hold down, I've got my horizontal and my vertical. Pretty self-explanatory. Horizontal is probably what we're going to need here. I just click anywhere on the image. It's going to do the lorem ipsum thing, which I'm sure if you've done any kind of graphic work at all in any kind of program, that's the first thing that pops up, because that's the default for anything, and I just do hashtag, it's the big thing nowadays is Bluey. Hashtag Bluey life. Okay, so I get how I want here. If I type what I want and I select all this, I can change my font up here. So all the way up here is where you're going to change your font. So you can change it to whatever you want. I have a whole bunch of my custom fonts loaded. So, what you see here might not be what you have, but Photoshop actually loads a lot of fonts into your system, so you're going to actually have a decent amount to pick from. So, let's just, nope, not that one. I'll just pick that one. We'll go with that one, even though it has nothing to do with Bluey. All right. So I've done that. I clicked enter, or I hit enter, and now it's done. See right over here, it's created a whole different layer right here. And if I can hide it, I can do all kinds of other things, whatever I want. All right, so we've done that, but let's say I have a little Bluey pattern. Do I have, I don't know if I have my Bluey pattern loaded into here. But let's just pretend that I do. Or let's say I don't. Let's say that, you know what? Let me do this. Let's say I go online and I buy a seamless pattern. I probably should have started with this as well. So I go online. You can go on to Design Bundles, Etsy, whatever it is, and download a seamless pattern that you want to do. So if I go in, sorry, I'm trying to go through all my seamless patterns. That apparently, I do have it. So I'm going to put my Bluey seamless pattern that I have onto here. Okay, so I have it on my desktop. I'm going to right click it and I'm going to go to open with Photoshop. That's going to open up the seamless pattern that I have, I purchased and I downloaded from, I believe it was Etsy. Now I want to make this into an actual pattern in Photoshop that I can use. Very simple. While this is open, and I didn't drag and drop it onto here, okay? I opened up as open with Photoshop so that it opens up as a completely separate file. If I go into here to edit and define as pattern, okay, it's going to put it into my patterns. So I'm just going to keep it as Bluey, and it's going to go to my patterns. When you first start off, you might not have this patterns window in here. If there's something that you see that I'm using that you don't have, come into window, and there's all these different things in here. And then you'll probably need to click on pattern. And then if you also don't have it, I highly suggest that you turn on Navigator as well. Navigator is, if is what's going to allow you to zoom in and zoom out a lot easier than anything else. But anyways, so now I've got my little thing in my pattern over here, right? Let's say I want to put this pattern into here because, I created the Bluey Life thing. And it's probably more appropriate for a kid, but, it is what it is. So there's a couple ways to do this. Since this being this simple pattern right here, where it's just this pink, I'm going to use something called the magic wand tool. And this is what this is over here. Is the magic wand is that it's going to select an area that is somewhat close to that color. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So when you start off, I think it starts off at a tolerance of 32. Don't really read too much into what tolerance means. It's just basically how close to that color that we're selecting. Since we have such contrasting colors between black and pink, the computer is not going to have a hard time recognizing between these. So if I click on this, make sure you actually have the mom layer selected. So if I click on this, you notice it's what's called the marching ants. It has selected that area in there, okay? If I clicked on this black, it's going to select all the black area, okay? Same thing with all these other ones. Since we all have one pink area, so we need to select all of these. So there's a couple ways to do this. On Windows, I'll hold down the control button. On a Mac, I'll hold down the command button or the shift button. And I think actually on Windows, it is the shift button, not the command button. Gave you bad information there. So I'm going to hold shift and I'm going to click all these little pink areas. And now I will have all of that selected. You can see my marching ants have selected that area. That means I have selected this area. If you're having problems like I did before where I clicked on it and all I got was my marching ants on the outside and it's selecting something completely different than what I'm trying to, make sure that you have the correct layer in here selected so you can see the little preview of the messy bun right here. Make sure you have that selected when you start doing this. Now the actual easiest way to do this is there's a setting up here called Contiguous. If I uncheck Contiguous, it is now going, when I go to select anything, it's going to select it throughout the whole entire image. It's not just going to go in that one little area. So show you what I mean. If I click in here, now everything that is pink has been selected. If I come over here and I click on the white, now everything that is white has been selected. You can see into here. And if I click on the black, it's going to select everything that is black. But if you haven't noticed, it didn't select anything in here that's black because it's a completely different layer. So keep that in mind if you're trying to you click on this and this at the same time, it's not going to work. You're going to have to either combine the layers, which I'll show you how to do later, or you're just going to have to, edit it as to come in here, do that, and then click on that. But you can't edit both at the same time if they're separate layers. So let's say that, so we have this selected. Now Photoshop has a really good sense of what you're trying to do when you do it. So what I mean by that is when I come into here and I go into patterns and I just click on that, it automatically knew that I wanted to put that pattern inside of here. Okay. One problem though is that this is a little big. You can barely see anything. So if I come over here and I can see right over here where it's named Pattern Fill 1, and if you do another one, it'll be Pattern Fill 2. If I double click on this, it'll give me the option to scale. So there's, scale it to however you want. Click OK. Boom. You just done something that people will spend $10 on Etsy to have custom done. Something that takes, it took me a little bit because I was trying to explain it, but I do this in 2 minutes. So that's a good skill to have. And that goes with anything. So there's messy mom buns, there's all these other ones. Some of these other graphics are a little harder to work with because they won't be quite as simple as this. Let's just say for whatever reason, I'm going to open, oops, I have this, this axolotl image and I wanted to modify it. So I go here and I open in, oops, let me go to File, New, let me create a whole new document. Drag and drop, put it in there. So let's just say for some reason I wanted to edit his body so that it looks like he's wearing a little bluey t-shirt or whatever the reason. I can't come in here and use my magic wand because it's going to be confused by what I'm trying to select. As you can see right here, I got my little marching ants and it's starting to select all these different weird things, and especially since I have contiguous turned off, but it's not going to know what I want to select because it's a whole bunch of different colors. Okay, it's not going to be able to figure this out. So the fastest way to do this is something called the pen tool. What the pen tool, it sounds like it's something that draws. I'm not sure why they call it the pen tool. I've been using Photoshop since Photoshop 6, like 20 years ago, and the pen tool has always done this action. And if you come over here and hover over it, it says it makes changes and paths to shapes with anchor points and handles. And as you can see, the little diagram, it's showing that it's doing all these things, and that anyways. So you can click on it, or you can click the P. That'll select your pen tool. If you notice anywhere that you hover over these, if there is a quick way to click, use it, or a hotkey, it'll be right next to the actual name. So the eraser tool, if I press E, it'll pull up it on the brush, which is what if you may think it is. So if I click on the brush button and I can actually, oops, I got to rasterize this layer. I can actually start drawing what you think of what a pen tool would do. But yeah, if you need to undo anything, Command Z, Control Z, come up in here to edit, and you'll see undo. Or if you wanted to redo what you just undid, whatever it may be. All right, so back to what I was doing. Pen tool. So this pen tool is how I'm going to actually kind of sort of crudely draw a t-shirt onto this. And I'll show you what I mean by that. This is where this navigator is going to come in, because this image is a little small for me to actually work with to see the actual area where I need to come into. I mean, I can do it, but it's not going to look very good. If I take this and I zoom it in, I can actually I can see more detail of where where I'm putting my pen. And then I use the navigator. This little red box area is what you're seeing. I can move that. I can use that to move around. You can't, you can use your mouse wheel if you got it, or, if you're on a laptop, you can do the whole pinch to zoom or whatever. But this, in my opinion, is the best way to look around. So if I need to modify anything, this is where I'm going to use my pen tool like this, and I zoom in and I just start clicking kind of an area that I want, and it's going to start creating these lines. And I'm going to kind of rush through this because I don't want to, this is something that I'll spend, hours trying to do, because I'm trying to make it perfect. So, and that's what I suggest you do too. And then if you do that for a customer, charge your time appropriately, because this is something that is a pain. Because let's say I said, oh crap, I needed to, change that or whatever. There's not really a good way to actually change this. I can sort of, curve it where I added a point, but I can't come into a point and then uh, maneuver it very well. So just keep that in mind, that take your time and just, slowly add these points. Like when I'm doing this, I will add these tiny little points like this. I'll take a little bit more time to actually do it, but I want that professional look. But anyways, so I'll come in here and oh boy, I don't even know what I'm selecting. But okay, whatever. Let's just say his t-shirt is very weird looking. And then I'm going to click on my original one right here. And now all of it went from being white to being blue. Oh crap, give me 1 second. All right, sorry about that. I had to make sure that something wasn't making too much noise. Anyways, so this went from being white to now being blue. Now, if I right click on this, sorry, I'm going to click on make selection. This rendering and this feathering, it's what feathering is that it's going to push out an additional 2 pixels from what you selected, or it's going to push out, whatever you selected out as. Um, if I took my time and I made sure that everything that I was selecting is good, I'm going to choose 0 because I don't need it to be, you know, but so I now have this selection. And if you recognize now, it's now the marching ants. So then if I come in here into my patterns and I select my bluey one, I've now put a very crude looking bluey t-shirt onto him. Oh, here's my navigator. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to change my scaling again. And there you go. It's very obviously very crude. It doesn't look very good because no t-shirt really looks like that. I would go through and change up some of this. I would come in here with my brush tool and put an outline around it, or whatever I needed to do. If you're not that artistic about it, I am far from it, then I probably wouldn't do things like this to actually modify the image. But this was just to show that, how, because a lot of people, a lot of customers want some kind of pattern substituted on whatever it is. I could have done a different pattern on this axolotl questions, where I used the pen tool, or something like this. I could have used the magic the magic wand and selected what I wanted. Okay. Um, huh, why is it not? Oh, I know. Okay, never mind. That won't happen if you're just uh, sorry. I'm just trying to double check something. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that won't happen to you. But so if I'm trying to do this, change this into a different pattern or whatever it may be, or even change the color of it. So let me come back out. Say I started off a whole new image, import in my graphic, I hit enter. Now I guess I should explain that what this selection tool does is that whatever I edit or whatever I add, it's going to be within the confines of whatever I selected. Because I can come in here right now and I can click on this and it's just going to do the entire thing. So that's why we do the selection tool. So if I come in here and I rasterize this layer and I start clicking, I hold down my shift and I'm clicking all these right here. Hopefully I'm grabbing everything. Sometimes I won't. And that's where you may have to adjust your tolerance, because I noticed right here it didn't select everything. Or, this is where a little bit of dedication comes into editing, where, I noticed that it didn't select this or it didn't select that. So I have to, hold my shift and, click it in there again, and I have to zoom in on it to change that. Or I unclick the contiguous and I do that, or I change the tolerance. But the problem is if I unclick the contiguous and I click on that, I got a little lucky because it didn't select very much in here and it mostly got what was in there. But you can see there's a little bit of area where it had selected in, and I don't want that. So something like this, I'm going to make sure that contiguous is still selected, but I might bump up the tolerance, being that I'm telling it to select anything within 50 shades. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's basically the way to think about it, is that I'm selecting anything like that. And if you did what I just did, where I actually clicked on that, or I clicked on the white, just hit Control Z or Command Z for undo, and it'll bring you back. But anyways, let me select this real quick. And yeah, that's good enough. And then if I wanted to add my pattern, I had my pattern there. Let's say I had some like cool axolotl pattern that I wanted to change that to, or the customer said that they wanted in there. Well, that's where I do that at. Or let's say I wanted to change that to a different color. So I hit my Control Z, come back out, and there's a couple ways I can do this. I can pull out my brush tool, which I showed you before. So here's the brush. It literally looks like a brush. Or I can press the B and I can start painting. So I can start painting over this to change the color of what I want it to be. How I change the color is down in here. There's two colors. There's your primary, or your foreground, and your background color. The one that the brush is going to use is this foreground color. And when I click on it, it's going to pull up the color wheel. And so you play around, choose whatever color that you want, click OK, and then do that. This will take a long time because I'm using a smaller brush. So if I press, there's a couple ways to change the size of this brush. If I come up here, this is the 90, I can change the size up to 200 or 1000, and you notice that it got bigger. And I'm clicking in and out around here, but because this is just the area that I have selected where the marching ants are surrounding, it's only going to let me modify what is in there. Okay, but if you can see, I didn't have any of this over here selected, and if I come over here, I pretty much didn't select anything on this S. So you kind of have to be careful with that. So there's going to be a lot of playing around with Photoshop, because it's a very powerful tool, and it can get you most of the way, but it's not going to get you all the way there. So it's just a lot of playing around, a lot of trial and error. It might be a year before you're actually super comfortable with Photoshop. That's how most people are. Um, there's another way to do this is, so if I hit Control Z all the way out and I have that, um, actually I'm not going to show it that way. That might get a little too confusing for right now. But as it stands right now, that's how your most basic tools on Photoshop work. So most people, that's all you're going to need to do. Um, and then the next biggest thing that I wanted to cover, because I've gotten a couple of requests about this, is mockups. If you're unfamiliar with what a mockup is, it's, let's say that I'm making a T-shirt and I want to advertise it on Etsy or my website or whatever, but I don't want to make the actual shirt because that's a waste of a shirt possibly. I can make a mock-up of that of that shirt to show the customer this is what it looks like, but it's not. This is not actually it. So if I come over here and let's just completely get out of this, we're all done with that. And then one other really quick note. I know I keep doing this. Let's say that you're editing your thing and you come over here and you delete all these layers. You got this and you realize, oh crap, I needed this in a different orientation. Like I needed this in landscape orientation. Just come over here to your properties, click that. So if you're doing tumblers, you're probably going to want to use it. You're probably going to want to use this orientation, especially with 8.5 by 11 paper, and then use it as normal. But I digress. So there's places on the internet that you can get mockups from. I don't suggest buying a mockup. I kind of think it's a little useless because most shirt companies will provide that for you when it comes to shirts. That is. And to show you what I mean, if let's say you buy your stuff from SS Activewear or wherever it may be, if you're dealing with a wholesaler, most of these places provide you images in order for you to advertise on your website, and you have to read the conditions. I know SS Activewear allows you to modify the images that they have. Okay, so if I come in here to resources, and it's different for every website, but if I come in here to resources and I come down to image library, let's just go with Gildan because that's the most popular polyester shirt, which is the 42,000. They're going to provide images of those shirts, and they'll provide, or not 4,200. What am I? Did I select that? I swear it's the 4,200. Or 42,000. Well, that pulled up right. 42,000L is the ladies' version. Let me try this again. Oh, there we go. So there's these images, and so you can select the model image, which is a blue t-shirt, which, as we all know with sublimation, doesn't work very well. So it's kind of dishonest to show your graphic on this. But they do provide this white t-shirt on here. So if you don't mind just showing it on this white t-shirt, then you can download that. And then most places, you just, select the high or, download or whatever, right click and save. And now you have that t-shirt image. If you want, there's another place, Vapor Apparel provides images. So if I um, look at their product images and I go to their basic shirt, they provide model photos for their white shirts. I would stick with the company that you bought it from. So if you bought a Gildan, or if you're using Gildan shirts, use a picture of a Gildan shirt. If you're using jerseys or Vapor Apparel, I would stick with, whatever one that you're using. Another place, if you can't find what you want, let's say you wanted like a female model image, which is increasingly harder to come by, is to use something like design bundles and come in here and you search mock-up white shirt, and like this is the one that I like to use, is this one right here, and it says your design here. Click on the download now. You'll get your zip file, and it's going to look like, let me get all this out of the way. It's going to look like this. And you're going to have a PSD file or a JPEG file. If you download from like the other supplier websites, they're going to give you a JPEG or a PNG. So that's what I'm going to edit. Right click, open with Photoshop. And then so there's my picture of my shirt. So it can be as simple as just taking your image, dragging and dropping it on top of the t-shirt, especially if it's, if it's a good quality PNG. I would use PNG for this, not a JPEG, because JPEGs don't have that transparent background. So you'll just end up with this white block around here and it'll look terrible. So use a PNG, and you can size it, place this wherever you want, and this is where there's no actual way to measure what it is on the shirt versus on here. What I mean by like the actual, I can't tell if this is going to be 7 inches across, or I can't tell. So what I'm basically saying is that it's going to be, you're going to have to use your best judgment to put it on there. Okay, I hit enter, and I can move it around and whatnot, and for most people that will work. However, I don't think it looks quite right, because look right here, there's some creases, there's some little area right in here and stuff like that. And that's where something called blending options comes into. Blending options is exactly what it sounds. It's that it's blending two layers together in order for it to actually look good. So I have my two different layers right here. I've got my image, and then I've got the one that I imported into here. If I right click on this and I click on blending options, it's going to pull up this it's going to pull up this window. The one that I'm concerned with is this blend mode right here. And you can kind of like look around and see how it's blending all these different things. But most of the time I want it on multiply. And it's really kind of hard to tell right now, but if you look right here versus when I go from normal to multiply, it kind of, it actually, you can kind of see the creases back in there. You can see this crease here and this crease here, versus before you couldn't really see it. So it gives it a more realistic look, and you might have to play with these little, because depending on the shirt, depending on what it is, it's going to look different. If you're using let's say you have a 65% polyester shirt, it would be a little dishonest to leave it like this, because it might not show up this vibrant. So for that, something like that, I come over here, go to the opacity, and you can change this down to like, whatever it may be. So it's a little bit more realistic to whatever it is, especially if you get on Etsy and you download, let's say you get a mock-up of a bleach shirt. If you do bleach shirts, I highly suggest playing with this opacity slider because it's never, even if you get a good transfer, it's never going to be as vibrant as 100%. So play with that so that it's just a little bit more realistic to what it's going to look like at the end. And then myself, I like to put at the bottom of all my mock-ups, I'll change the font size and all that, image shown is a mock-up of the actual product. I do that because I just don't want people to have false expectations of what it would look like, what they thought it would look like, or whatever it may be. But that's in a nutshell how you do a mock-up, and that's how you would blend two images together. So if you had this and another image that you wanted to print out or whatever it may be, that's how you layer them. So that's pretty much what I wanted to go over. If anybody has any questions, I'll give it a minute since I know that there's a delay. And what I probably went through, I might have gone a little bit too fast because what may make sense in my head probably doesn't make sense in your head. So if you're still unsure about something, please ask because I want to do this so that more people are successful in their t-shirt business or their sublimation business using tools that are actually meant for graphic editing. And this is really my first time teaching a design style class, so I'm still trying to figure out sort of curriculum. And also, I plan on doing this a lot more often. And I don't always want it to be about Photoshop. If somebody is like, I don't know how to get started on Etsy, I don't know how to get started on Shopify, or I don't know what to do for a website, or how do I drive customers to my website? I can help with that. There's obviously videos on YouTube on how to do that. But I can tell you from my experiences, and especially coming from a sublimation business, because a lot of those, um, a lot of advertising based videos on YouTube are based on drop shipping, which is usually not what any of us do. So that's kind of a different beast. Yes, Peggy. I don't. I get messages on Facebook all the time for people, or you can comment down, or whatever it may be. But yes, feel free to send me a message. And I do plan on doing this on Saturdays versus Sundays because I know people go to church. Maybe I'll do it like on an actual work day, so that people aren't, just because, I mean, who really wants to sit there and watch this live stream on Saturdays if you have better things to do? So if you have any suggestions on when I should actually do the live stream, when is better for you, I take all that input. All right, well, I know there's only 5 people on, so, I didn't expect there to be very many questions, but feel free to reach out to me later, and thank you for watching.